In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. And once again, JB, for the third time, I think we can call this the biggest game of the year, but this might be the biggest game of the year in the CFL. Hamilton visits Toronto, their final of 4 meetings. And this one is potentially for all the marbles in the East. And realistically, looking at the other possibilities, and we'll talk about all these potential playoff scenarios, but really the winner of this game probably wins the East. And there's been no other game in the CFL this year with that much that the winner can take away from it. So a huge game this week, JB.
It is everything that we hoped this season would be. You know, the Argos are competitive. They're able to hold their own with Hamilton. They have not played well the last 2 weeks. This is going to be a huge test to see if they can bring their A game. There's going to be a lot of Hamilton fans there. Hamilton is feeling very confident. They're feeling, they've got their quarterback. They got their team firing. They're mad about us ruining Thanksgiving. This is a huge challenge. I'm really excited to see the test because I think if the Argos can meet this, that speaks very well to their playoff chances.
We've got some news and notes to get through, plus we will hit you with those playoff scenarios we talked about. There's some transactions. One that's, I think, really exciting, maybe 2, and we'll go through those. We have to update the injuries. It's mostly good news, and so that's to come, as well as OCDC, one thing, and of course, our world-famous predictions. That's all coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. News and notes. Let's get into it. Cordero Law was named a top performer for Week 14. Very deserving in my mind. I thought he had a great game against Ottawa. JB, I think you had him as your defensive player of the game with those 2 sacks. My question is, where is the love for Boris Bede? He's an outstanding performer. A week ago, he does the exact same thing this week, and nothing.
Well, there's only so much love a kicker's going to get. So I think kickers are fine with getting a little, and that's all right too. We don't necessarily need to pile that pressure on him. Law deserved it. He played a great game. If he can be that guy, that changes the dynamic of the defense. If you can add in his veteran ability with the other guys coming back healthy, that was definitely my most exciting takeaway from the Ottawa game. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, if this defensive line, and we've got a few, we'll get into the injury report a bit later, and a couple guys coming back to it, but they did look last week the way that we hoped they would look. And Cordero Law, when he's on, and I don't think we've seen him just muscle guys like he did last week, and maybe it just took a few games to get going. He was a little bit late to get into things due to injury, and so once he's firing, man, he's a force. So we'll see what he looks like against a much better offensive line. This is going to be a really tough test for him actually this week, but he's at least in the right place for him. He's playing at his best, so that's pretty exciting.
You don't need to get sacks. Sacks are one of the most overrated stats in football. They're like RBIs in baseball. Pressure is what you need. You need the quarterback thinking about you. So I don't, if they can generate pressure with Law like they did against Ottawa, they didn't ring up a million sacks. So I think if they can get 4-man pressure, if Law can help them get 4-man pressure, that's what you have to win in the CFL. You have to be able to get pressure with 4, or you're in a lot of trouble, because if you have to dedicate, occasionally, of course, you can blitz, but if you have to regularly do that, man, the good quarterbacks are just going to eat you alive.
And we are at the stage of the season now where good quarterbacks are all that really matters, because you've got one this week in playing Hamilton. I think you probably have a pretty good quarterback when you play Edmonton. We're not going to talk about that too much right now.
Wait for that one.
Oh, man. I bet you Nick Arbuckle looks pretty good on the BMO field, but we'll save that for next week. And then in the playoffs, obviously, you're going to run into good quarterbacks. So, yeah, that's what matters. And so you're right. You've got to, if you can't generate pressure with 4, then you're going to get picked apart by good quarterbacks, because they'll know you've got a blitz. They'll know in passing situations, they know a blitz is coming because it has to. And they're going to be able to tear it up. The CFL this week released their official playoff scenarios. And the thing is, if Toronto can win on Friday, nothing else matters. We'll sort of do the Toronto version of this for you, because we know you as Toronto Argonauts fans, this is why you're listening to this podcast. So the simple version: Toronto beats Hamilton, nothing else matters. Toronto clinches the East. It means they play a home game at BMO Field December 5th, the East final. And it means the game that we're all dreading against Edmonton means nothing. So this is all the best of like so many different worlds. All of our problems go away. If only the Argonauts can beat the Tiger Cats on Friday, everything else goes away and we can all relax, enjoy the last week and a half of football. We can enjoy the first round of the playoffs, take a rooting interest in, whatever teams we would like to face, and then get ready to cheer on the Argos December 5th. However, if Hamilton wins on Friday, then it becomes a little bit of a mess, and it's not a good scenario for Toronto at all, because at that point, Hamilton will have the tiebreaker. It'll be 2 wins apiece, but they will have the point differential tiebreaker. So in order for Toronto to win the East, they would have to beat Edmonton and then hope that Hamilton loses in their season finale, which is in Hamilton, to Saskatchewan. And further complicating this is that Saskatchewan very likely will have nothing to play for in that last week of the season, because they have a game this week against Edmonton, and if they win or tie, or if Calgary loses, then Saskatchewan has wrapped up second place and a home playoff game in the West against Calgary. So probably one of those things happens this weekend. I think almost certainly Saskatchewan will beat Edmonton, and at that point, that's, it basically means that there's no way Saskatchewan is going to send in their tier 1 unit to Hamilton in the final week of the season in a game that means nothing. They've got injury issues of their own. They will take that week to heal up. And if Hamilton's playing for first place, I can't see that result being anything other than a Hamilton win. So back to the original point, in this playoff scenario, the Argos have to win on Friday.
This is the first game of the playoffs. I don't think there's any two ways about it. This is the first game of the playoffs. They are a much better team at home. If there's any hope of going to the Grey Cup, they need to be at home for the playoffs. And, they need to win this game, which is the first round of the playoffs, which then sets them up for a home field game, ideally, against a team that had to work hard against an opponent. And we bring him into BMO. So that's the way I look at it. It's not an elimination game, but it is the first round of the playoffs in almost every facet. So how the team performs will be definitely indicative of their playoff prowess. I think it is a high pressure game and an absolutely necessary game.
There were 3 transactions that the Argos made this week. There may be more to come. Usually along with acquisitions come players being released or players being moved to the injured list. And we haven't really seen that movement yet. No word yet on Tristan Deku. We haven't heard about Chris Edwards. And so it could be that some other moves are coming, but 3 signings that we can talk about at this point. So wide receiver Josh Huff, which is a really exciting signing we'll detail in just a minute. Right tackle Thaddeus Coleman, which I'm actually pretty excited about. And Brady Sheldon, who I don't know a lot about. He's a linebacker. We'll tell you what we do know about him in just a moment's time. But let's start off with Josh Huff. So this is huge. So Josh Huff, a 3rd round draft pick of the Philadelphia Eagles, a pretty established NFL player for a few years, and then he ends up going to Calgary and looks great. He is also someone that is familiar with the Calgary system, Coach Dinwiddie's system. He's familiar with the verbiage and terminology. So it's not someone that's going to take a long time to get acclimated. He's been playing that X spot, and he's a guy that Calgary wouldn't have released if not for the Reggie Begelton signing. So because they signed Reggie Begelton, and obviously if you can, you're going to sign Reggie Begelton. He's excellent. But they didn't have room to keep both American receivers, and both guys are ex-receivers. So you look at this and you consider the fact that Deveris Daniels has been pushed inside to play that W spot. Potentially having Josh Huff on the outside, he is a quality X receiver. And let me tell you some of the things I really like about him. So he's not, and these, I guess I'm going to start with the negatives here. He's not the best route runner you'll ever see. He's not the fastest guy you'll ever see. But he has this sort of CFL ability to get open. He's great at finding space. He's an amazing run blocker. That's probably what he does best. And I know that doesn't sound exciting. That's a huge advantage. I would love for the Argos to get better run blocking from their receivers. And he would automatically come in, I think, being the best run blocker, even better than Eric Rogers, I would say. So that's a huge win right there. He is a talented receiver. He's got great receiving experience, but he's also a great kick returner and punt returner. He's returning punts in Calgary. He was a kick returner in the NFL. He still, to this day, has the Philadelphia Eagles' longest touchdown in that franchise's history at 107 yards, kick return touchdown. He's just one of those guys, and he's not like a 4.2, 4.3, possibly even 4.4 guy. But he reads space really well. He's got wonderful vision. That's what makes him such a good receiver, but it's what makes him an outstanding kick returner and punt returner. And this year, he's one of the top punt returners in the league. So that was a need, just that on its own. But then you add to the fact that you can put him out there at X. If we're still waiting for Eric Rogers to return, you keep Daniels in the slot, you put Huff at X. That's a massive signing for this point in the year.
Great veteran ad. And, the Argos are going to need help on the outside. Running up the middle is probably not our strength. So having a guy out there who can block a bit more on the edges and, widen the field on our run plays is good, for jet sweeps. He's a professional receiver. I think it's a good ad. I don't think it's a good depth ad heading into the playoffs. So I don't think it's going to light the team on fire or anything, but I think that it's a good pickup, solid, GM move.
I think what it allows you to do is, again, if Eric Rogers doesn't come back or doesn't come back soon, it allows you to then move Chandler Worthy over to the field side instead of having him play the X. And he's not a great run blocker. You have on him on the other side now, and now you can actually focus on running to the boundary and really creating some advantages off of that too, because then you have run fakes to the boundary side, receivers leaking past, stock blocking and then releasing, and that creates big play opportunities too. So I think there's some really cool stuff that can come out of this signing. And let's not forget, he was a productive receiver in Calgary. So far through 9 games this year, 37 catches for 507 yards. That's not nothing.
No, I mean, it's a crazy pickup to be able to get him for free heading into the playoffs. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's about as exciting a signing you could have at this stage of the year. I can't think of any other person you would bring in where you'd be like, whoa, because the fact that he also knows the system, right? Like all of that stuff, everything is a box checked. Let's talk about Thaddeus Coleman a little bit. This one I didn't see coming at all because Thaddeus Coleman had retired as far as I was aware. He's 36 years old. He's played with Edmonton and Saskatchewan. And I think this is a situation where I have to imagine this is Coach McAdoo making a phone call, looking around at the offensive line, seeing how they're just not the same unit since Jamal Campbell went down. And he's thinking to himself, who do I know that is a lockdown right tackle? And Thaddeus Coleman, I don't know what he's been doing, enjoying this year, probably enjoying, watching the games and everything else. But he's still going to be 6'7", and to bring in a guy like that with that sort of veteran savvy, even if it takes him a week or two to get in some shape, at 36. To ask for 4 games, that's what you're looking for, I don't think is unrealistic, or however long it takes for Jamal Campbell to come back. But if it's 4 games all the way to the Grey Cup, that's something you can do. We've talked about the demands on Charleston Hughes and how difficult it was going to be on Odell Willis earlier in the season when that still looked like it was a possibility, and how you have to rest guys. Well, this is the perfect scenario for a 36-year-old offensive tackle to come in for that playoff push.
You can bring the offensive line is definitely one of those positions where a guy can guile his way when maybe he doesn't quite have, the twitch that he might have had at 28. So yeah, for sure, bring him in, and I think having a guy like that in the room is good for keeping the room tough and ready to roll. Like you need that kind of attitude, and if he's not a washout, I think it's again a nice depth signing. Like you get him in there. You basically have him on the sidelines to bring in if guys go down in game.
And I actually wouldn't be surprised to see, this is my prediction, is that you will see the first playoff game. I think if Jamal Campbell's not out there, I think Thaddeus Coleman will be out there at right tackle. I think I'm almost 100% on that.
We'll know. I mean, the one thing about football, we'll know immediately how much gas is left in the tank.
Yes, it won't take long to see that. And I think the nice thing about Thaddeus Coleman, just like we've talked about with all of these Calgary guys that have been brought in, and Josh Huff, who knows Coach Dinwiddie and everything else, Thaddeus Coleman, having worked extensively with Coach McAdoo, it's not going to take him long. He's a veteran in the first place. He's a CFL veteran in the first place, and he knows his positional coach extremely well. So they're not going to take long to get on the same page. He'll pick this up quickly. He's a guy that I think if you really needed to have him start this week at right tackle, I think he could do it. It's not ideal, but I think if there's one guy you could bring in where that could get done, he's the guy. The third signing is Brady Sheldon, and he's a linebacker that I really don't know too much about. I've just been looking him up, and I haven't even started the film watching process on him. To me, this looks like a signing more for next year or for an emergency scenario if there are 3 or 4 injuries to the linebacking core. Because I have to think that Nate Holley is in the plans first. He should be clearing his quarantine shortly. He, as the 2019 Rookie of the Year, and all the things that he can do and has done in the CFL, I think is probably going to be the guy you go with if you need somebody. So I see this Brady Sheldon signing as a signing for the future more than anything else. But it's intriguing. He's an interesting looking athlete. JB, let's do some injury overview for this week. And for the first time in a long time, it's mostly good news. The negative is that, of course, not to anyone's surprise, John White did not practice. And I think we're just waiting for them to announce that he'll be put on injured reserve. So that's really unfortunate. We're still, fingers crossed, we haven't heard a full update on that injury scenario. We're still hoping that the damage is really minor, but I don't expect to see John White for the rest of the season. Now, aside from him appearing on the injury list, everyone else is really good news. We've got full practice from all those guys that were on the one-game list. So that's Coney Ely, Fabian Foote, DJ Foster, and all 3 of those guys I think will play in the game. Jamal Peters seems to be over his knee injury, has rehabbed that, and he may end up at least being dressed this week, if not starting. I think Jalen Collins has filled in really nicely, but I would like to get Jamal Peters back out there. I thought he was having a terrific season. And Jonathan Zamora is obviously out there. Tiki Sanko is out there. And Alexandre Chevrier, who was limited today, that's still a good sign. And then Brandon Calver, who was on the 6-game injury list, has come off of that list, and he was a full participant in practice today. So finally, JB, it's the second last week of the season, but this team is finally getting healthy at the right time.
Yeah, I don't know in the wild world of the CFL how much faith you can put into its injury report, but it looks good. Hopefully, Deku and Edwards are not badly hurt, and everybody seems to be getting pretty healthy. I'd love to come out and surprise Hamilton with Rogers playing. I think that's the best case scenario. I'm concerned about the running back. We didn't sign a running back, and maybe they know something about John White. It certainly looked like John White's season's over. But I was surprised they didn't bring a running back in. Maybe they just couldn't find anybody that they thought was worth running through, but I was surprised by that. I think we're going to need another running back.
It would really surprise me. I thought, like I said, I think I said on the last podcast, I guarantee they will bring in a running back this week, and yet they haven't. So that being the case, obviously they're going to go ahead with DJ Foster and AJ Ouellette this week. If knock on wood, if something were to happen to one of those guys, it's not as though there aren't other options here. So. And without getting into like Cameron Scarlett, for example, who's on the practice squad from Stanford, a guy who hasn't really seen any time at all. Like, let's not forget that a lot of the guys we have as fullbacks were tailbacks in their university programs. So you've got like, Dion Pellerin, for example, Asnel Robo. Those guys have both carried the football. They're both experienced backs. If you needed one of them to be the backup running back and just get in there to spell, it's not a bad scenario. They're good. They're good blockers. They're there for passing. It's not like your second running back is getting a ton of carries. Like even when it's DJ Foster and John White, there've been games where DJ Foster gets like 3 carries.
I know those are the games we lose.
A lot of them are, but you can do it. It's not. I'm not saying it's an ideal scenario.
I know they can, but. I know they're not going to be able to. I mean, it's a hard place because what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to go out and find a starting running back. If you could, everybody would. So it's a tough position to be in. So I hope that they have some phone numbers that they can reach out and take a shot at finding some lightning. Maybe find a guy who's got 3 games in him. That's all we need.
I think they've obviously decided that it's not worth the risk that is posed by one of these guys being injured isn't something that can't be addressed quickly too, because unlike a lot of positions, running back you can pick up fairly quickly, and so that's a scenario where they probably feel as though they can do that within the week if need be, but it's not worth it for this week because again with quarantine time and everything else. They're not going to do it. And I think you're probably at that point saying, well, aren't we just best then going with one of the guys we already know? And so if the worst case scenario does come up, another running back is hurt, I think they just feel like we're going to have, because remember, they have dressed just one running back too. So we remember when DJ Foster was the only running back on the roster earlier this year, and that wasn't ideal and he was exhausted, but you're going to do it if it's a playoff game.
I think it makes sense. You don't want to be teaching anybody anything this week. So, try and get this win, because if you get this win, then you got yourself a couple of weeks to get somebody ready.
Yeah, that's it. So It's just all hands on deck. Let's focus on teaching the guys we have, not trying to bring all these other guys up to speed on every different positional group and see if we can win this game. All right, JB, let's get to the game itself. So this is the 4th matchup, which is such a weird season, and I can't believe that Montreal's 4 games against the Red Blacks and Toronto's 4 games against the Ticats have not somehow factored in horribly to this, because it just doesn't look like no matter what happens, like it would have to be a disaster scenario for Montreal to catch Toronto at this point. But it's turned out that this 4-game series between Toronto and Hamilton has been at least as bad for Hamilton as it is for Toronto. I remember when the schedule first came out, we were saying, "Oh, like this is the worst thing ever, having to play Hamilton 4 times." They were the consensus Grey Cup champions, according to everybody. And then the 2 games against Winnipeg, and somehow Toronto splits those 2 games against Winnipeg. They're 2-1 right now against Hamilton, a chance to be 3-1. This is going to be a really cool environment at BMO Field. So I hope you're going. I hope everyone listening, I hope you're going there, because it's going to be an amazing environment. And the environment's great anyway. All the games this year have been awesome, even when there was all the stadium spacing, and even though the crowds haven't been great, the environment's been good. It is going to be nuts this week, because I know there's so many Hamilton fans that are making the trip, and Argos fans have responded too. There should be a good sized crowd. I know, just looking at the ticket sales earlier today, there are sections that appear to be sold out, which is always promising. I do think there's spacing within those sections, but still, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait for Friday's game, and everything's on the line. Like, what a perfect recipe. JB, it's time for your favorite section of the week. It's OCDC. Let's start off with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I will be the offensive coordinator for Hamilton. You will be the defensive coordinator for Hamilton. Here's what I've got this week. So if I'm the Hamilton Tiger Cats, I first of all want to try and find a way to get Toronto's backers isolated in coverage. So I'm going to do everything I can, moving guys around. I'm going to start with receivers in the backfield, motion them out, see if you can catch Toronto in man, trying to use Toronto's rules against them, especially because there's been so much shifting around within the linebacker group for the Argos over the last few weeks. And even though you've got Judge and Mwamba back there, things haven't been quite the same. There has been, with all this movement, you have to think there's been a little bit of simplifying somewhere along the way for all these new pieces that have been brought in. Try and use Toronto's rules against them. See if you can isolate backers in coverage against receivers. And I think that's probably where I'm going to start, and see if you can exploit some of those mid-range holes that I think will be there. I'm going to assume Toronto's going to come into the game hell-bent on stopping the run and trying to stop the deep bomb. And so I expect the middle of the field to be there. If I can catch a speedy receiver in linebacker coverage over the middle, that's what I'm looking for. The other thing I want to do as Hamilton is I want to try and get Masoli to extend the play a little bit. So I know they don't run a ton of stuff out of like pistol, but that's something that I would love to see bootlegs out of pistol. But even if it's just out of regular shotgun, what looks like option reads, but are really just play action, get Masoli moving to the outside to really try and extend the amount of time that Toronto's in coverage. The Toronto DBs are good, but I believe the Hamilton receivers can win those battles if they're given time to. And so find ways to change that launch point, get Masoli outside the pocket, not because the protection's not good, but just because it now forces the DBs to cover for a few more seconds. And they've got to keep an eye on Masoli. He's not a speedster by any means, but he can move and he can take advantage of open space. So that's something that I would focus on as Hamilton's offensive coordinator this week.
If I'm Hamilton's defensive coordinator and I'm looking at that Ottawa film, like one thing, becomes immediately apparent is you want to try and rattle the quarterback. So I'm setting a lot of pressure, a lot of stunts. I'm trying to get at that quarterback as much as possible. I want that clock in his head sped up. I want him throwing off balance. He's, not necessarily rolling out, which I think he's decent at. I'm keeping him in the pocket, but I'm making the pocket small, and keeping him having to throw without necessarily setting his feet, getting up in his face, so he can't follow through. And I'm playing underneath zone and just reading eyes. And, I'm Hamilton. I'm ball hawking all day. I'm just playing underneath zone, letting guys run their routes, and then watching those eyes, and then jumping everything I can. I would play very aggressive. I think he's shown a proclivity for turning the ball over, and I'm Hamilton. I'm more than happy to have a quarterback like that who is not secure with the ball, and jump on it. And he likes to throw deep, but I'm not gonna worry about the deep throw. I'm gonna focus on pressure and jumping underneath throws, and live with whatever he can pull off on the deep throw. I'm willing to sacrifice that a little, because I think I'm gonna get a pick six or 2 or 3 turnovers, and that'll be enough to win the game. So that's definitely my perspective. I'm not concerned about the run. I don't think Toronto's run game is going to be much. So from a defensive point of view, I'm pass defending all day. And if they beat us running for 200 yards, well, that'll surprise me, but I will tip my hat. But I'm zone underneath and pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, Marshall Ferguson's got an interesting article this week on CFL.ca breaking down the Hamilton-Toronto matchup. And, Marshall's awesome with all of his charts and spreadsheets. And there's a lot of data there to suggest that the passing game is what's going to win the game for whoever wins it. It's not going to be through the run. And I think you could probably say that about a lot of CFL games, but the numbers really do hold true in the 3 games that we've had to see so far between Toronto and Hamilton. It's the team that is able to pass the ball more efficiently that wins the game. So yeah, I think that makes sense. In terms of both of our plans for the Hamilton side. Let's change over and coordinate for the good guys. So as the Toronto Argonauts offensive coordinator, I'm really excited about this game plan, and I'm really hoping that Toronto doesn't let me down with this. Last week in Ottawa, I loved all of the new stuff that we saw. And I think you're only showing new stuff against Ottawa if it's going somewhere. You're not showing new stuff against Ottawa to beat Ottawa. The hope, now it turns out they needed it, but the hope would be going into that Ottawa game that you can just beat them by being who you are. But them showing new things there, to me, means you are planting seeds. You're putting things on film that you can now use to your advantage, because some of those counters that we saw last week, some of the power runs that we saw, some of the search runs that we saw with the slot backs kicking out defenders, and even Theron Churchill being used as a slot back to seal an edge, to crack, to kick out. Those plays are new. And Hamilton undoubtedly has been looking at those this week in film, because they have to. It's irresponsible if you don't. You've got to prepare for that, because they're certainly in the playbook. Toronto can go to them if they want to. I do think we'll see a few of them, but then I'm hoping that we see action off of that. So I want to see passes off of that same counter action. I want to see not only passes into the flats for the slot back that would typically be kicking out. Like sometimes we see this play a lot in the CFL, where he'll then not kick out, but extend beyond the defensive end and then take a pass in the flats. But I want to see some gadgetry out of that. So use double levels, pump fake to the guy in the flats and then find a deep out or a crosser over the middle. Really use Hamilton's film study against them this week in having to prepare for this stuff in a short week, and now take advantage of it by putting in what they hopefully have in there as the sort of phase 2 of this series. So the one other thing I want to add is we haven't seen Toronto run anything out of bunch, and I think that's sort of an interesting thing it's just not really a CFL thing. It takes away the advantage of your waggle. But I wouldn't mind seeing how Hamilton reacts to running bunch on the field side. It would be really interesting just to see them give Hamilton a different look, just to see what's there. Because this is not just for this game, but there's likely going to be a 5th game between Toronto and Hamilton in some way or other. And so seeing how they react to different formations will be part of my plan too. So I want to run some quads. I want to run some quins. I want to run some bunch, see what they do there. And the very last thing I'll say, I know I've got a lot of things in the plan here, but I kind of want to force Adeleke to cheat to the boundary side. I want to keep targeting Daniels like Toronto did last week. He had a ton of targets, and I want to see if they can slowly bring Adeleke out of the middle of the field. And then that's where you look to light Hamilton up with a skinny post coming from the field side. So if they can get Adeleke to come off his mark, to come down and try and help out on all these targets that are going to the boundary side to Daniels and whoever's out there with him at X, then that's the potential for a home run. So those are all the things in my Toronto plan for this week.
Well, Hamilton is definitely the best team we've played in a month. I think that Mazzoli has settled in, and he's not quite MVP Mazzoli, but I think he's feeling comfortable. I think he's moving well. Jackson is a decent running back. Banks looked better in the BC game. Not quite what we'd seen in the past, but a little bit. He blew through on that deep corner, and guys couldn't stay with him. So it's going to be a big test. I think that I would probably spy Mazzoli. I would try and take away those free first downs that he often gets. So that's one thing I would mix in. Like, again, nothing I would do every down because that's stupid. But I would definitely mix in maybe Cam Judge on spying to try and take away those free first downs that continue drives. And I'm looking to play deep pass coverage on first down. Mazzoli loves to air it out. I'm not totally worried about him, sort of killing us on the underneath. I think you want to take away those deep passes. And so I'm looking. He loves to throw that on first down. I'm looking to take away the deep pass on first down, and on second down, I am run blitzing like a sob. And they love play action, but if you bring 5 guys, like who cares if it's play action? My biggest concern is Jackson out of the backfield. Haven't played a lot of teams that use him. They used him a couple of times in BC, especially basically where he ran seams, and that's a danger. And just me personally, I hate running backs on linebackers. My philosophy is just, let linebackers play run, let DBs play pass. So I think that you're looking to have a DB pick that route up out of the backfield. I hope they don't put a linebacker on him. I don't want to see a linebacker trying to catch Jackson running down the field on a seam. So, in terms of scheme, I want a safety on him coming out of the backfield, deep pass coverage on first, run blitz the house on second.
It's time for one thing. My one thing this week is something that I don't normally believe in a lot, and that is gadget plays, emptying the bag. I'm not a believer in trick plays unless you are the inferior team. Like if you are the Ottawa Redblacks, if you're the Edmonton Elks, then yeah, I think you should be running a couple of trick plays every game. You should have that in your arsenal because you're not the better team. Toronto's a quality team. They have a roster that can go head to head with anyone. And so I'm not really a fan of gadget plays, that being the case. However, if there's a game where you're going to empty the bag, this is it. There's so much on the line here. Anything that Coach Dinwiddie has been saving up this year, I want to see out there on the field. So everything from double passes to flea flickers to fake punts to fake field goals. I want to see it out there. Obviously, if the situation dictates, I don't want it to be forced. But I just want to feel like at the end of the game, regardless of the result, I want to feel like they did everything they possibly could to win this game. And, hopefully it works out. But even if it doesn't, that you didn't leave anything, that you didn't, you're like, oh man, if only we'd used this, or wouldn't this have been a good play to use here? I don't want any of that. So bring it out. Let's see some of that stuff for this game.
I agree if you have something locked. Because the downside is running a trick play that doesn't work is like standing in the middle of the field with your pants down. You look like such an idiot, and it's so deflating and embarrassing. I think it's such a high reward, high penalty move. You get it. Everybody's jumping up and down. You've been working on this in practice. We got him. Gives great juice to the team. Falls apart. You look embarrassing. So I think, yes, if they have something absolutely locked that they've been working on all season. Man, you watch the NFL now. There's probably 2 double passes a game. It absolutely has taken off as a legit. Almost moving out of gadget into a legitimate wrinkle, like a jet sweep. It's like, okay, jet sweep, middle run, double pass.
It's a way to keep defenses honest.
Yeah, I always wondered as a defensive coordinator. I'm like, why doesn't the running back throw the ball? Like, the whole world, you teach the whole world to pursuit. So yeah, I think it's smart. I think it slows down teams' pursuit, and if they're wary of it. So yeah, I think it'd be great. I think the crowd would go bananas. I love it. I love it as a move. Just, man, you better friggin' get it.
Where are you going with your one thing?
I don't know. My no turnovers did not turn out well last time I hoped for it. So I'm a little bit wary. I would still love to see a pick 6, but I'm going to go here offensive again. And Chandler Worthy. I'd really like to see Chandler Worthy have 5 targets. I feel like he is somebody we can jet sweep with. Bubble screen, reverses. He's a guy that can widen the field, slows down pass rush, gives everybody a moment of pause. I'd like to see him become a factor on the offense, and to be honest, take some of those Anderson touches and give them the Worthy.
You were just talking about like defenses reacting to things too. You're seeing a lot of things now in the NFL where you will use pulling guards against defenses too. So, have that jet action come across with a pulling guard and then go the other way with something and really test the discipline of those Montreal backers.
I think that's what you want to do. I think what from a defensive point of view, the best thing a team can do is never challenge your rules. And you love that. Like, you just line it up and we're just going to play ball. Like, a defense will take that all day. Defenses hate having to cover the whole field. And, you have movement, you have fakes, you have misdirection. Absolutely, you need to have that involved. I mean, I love how Hamilton runs play action on 80% of their plays, seemingly. I think that's great. I think that should be an absolute standard, that you should be looking to do way more misdirection with Macbeth. I don't think the Argos are doing him any favors, not stretching the field, not making the defenders have to respect, outside run or the edges. I think we want to vary up our offense to keep the defense off balance. When a defense is balanced and is dictating to you what the play is going to be, that's when you start getting into real problems. You have to dictate to the defense. You have to keep the defense. I'd love to see, I know this is all the stuff we're talking about, but I'd love to see some more hurry up. I think most quarterbacks are better, and Macbeth is no different when it comes to hurry up. I'd love to see a little more hurry up mixed in. I don't want them to lose faith in him. We're all in, man. It's going to be what it's going to be. So, let the guy cook. And if he turns it over 5 times, then, that is what it is. But we are pot committed.
Time for our predictions, JB. So I'll go first. I trust that you're not going to just copy mine. I'm nervous about this game. And ultimately, I decided I will go back to my preseason prediction with this, because it's been the most correct thing I have done all year.
I know we didn't even need to run the damn season.
I know our preseason predictions have been so I think we've got 2 wrong all year, which is insane. And here we are. I'm starting to doubt things because I know Toronto has not looked good the last couple of weeks. They really should have lost to BC. They almost lost to Ottawa. And Hamilton's been looking very good. They've had a couple good games in a row, and so I'm nervous. But it's at BMO. The Argos have not lost at BMO in a long, long time. And my preseason prediction was Toronto winning this game, so I will stick with that. And I think it's going to be a tight one. I think this is either a made or missed field goal at the buzzer, kind of like last time. But this is Toronto 20, Hamilton 18.
Oh. Well, mine is similar, but I think it's going to be a higher scoring game. I have Toronto 28, Hamilton 25. I'm with you too. I think there's no chance this game does not come down to a field goal. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a fantastic test for every aspect of the Argos. I mean, I thought Coach Don Brown, he had such a great line the other day about football will introduce you to yourself. And I think that this game is going to introduce us to who the Toronto Argonauts are. So I'm really excited to see who they are.
That will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough. Don't forget to check out the scouting report, which will come out a little bit later this week. I've got Kyle Mello in, substituting for Marshall Ferguson to give us a fresh perspective on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And as always, you can find all of our stuff at xsandargos.com. And if you want the podcast to appear right there on your phone, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the fight.